In 10 years, a dark prophecy looms over the Federation Kingdom of the East. The kingdom is destined to be destroyed by a mysterious woman wielding immense, destructive power. This cataclysm will be brought about by the hands of 5 powerful individuals known as the Great Sins. Their combined strength will cause the entire kingdom to fall into absolute ruin. In order to stop this from happening, a young man devises a plan to intervene, and he decides that the only way to prevent this future is to become the patron of the 5 Great Sins himself. However, he now realizes that the responsibility he took on has become a much bigger deal than he ever anticipated. The story then flashes back to how his journey began, showing him in a lavish room. He recalls being an overworked office employee before suddenly possessing the body of a noble in a fantasy world. He struggles to read a book, only for a servant to point out he is holding it upside down. He is illiterate and powerless in this new world. Despite these drawbacks, he is met with a grand feast, discovering the luxuries that come with his new noble status. After enjoying the delicious meal, a maid informs him that she will help prepare his bath for the evening. He finds himself being pampered by 2 maids, realizing he can live a comfortable, useless life as a young master. And the young man thinks to himself that this is the perfect life, even though he has no idea where he is. While bathing, a maid tells him to sleep early because the other young masters will be returning tomorrow, which confuses him. And she clarifies that she means young masters Leo and Tonio, and she questions why he seems to not know his own family. Hearing those names, the young man feels a strange and ominous sense of familiarity. The sudden realization causes him to panic and dunk his head underwater, startling the 2 maids. As his mind races, he comes to a horrifying conclusion about where he has been reincarnated. He has been reborn inside the world of a story he knows called Psychedelia. He remembers his past life, where he spent countless hours playing a game called Psychedelia on a handheld console. As a hardcore gamer, he was completely engrossed, surrounded by empty drink cans while mastering every aspect of the game. The main antagonists were the 5 Great Sins, powerful individuals representing wrath, greed, sloth, pride, and obsession. He also recalls the corrupt palatial house led by a wicked patriarch and his 2 villainous sons, Leo and Tonio. Now, he collapses to his knees as he realizes he has been reincarnated into that very same family. He remembers a specific sub-quest where the player had to investigate the family's criminal organization, Avalon. Standing outside the massive palatial mansion, the game's setting is now his terrifying reality. He is Alan Palacio, the family's disposable 3rd son and an extra villain, destined to be one of the first victims of the 5 sins. He stands on his bed in despair, wishing he could return to his old life as an overworked wage slave. The life of luxury is meaningless when he knows he is fated to die in 10 years, a grim reality he can't escape. He questions his terrible luck, wondering why he was reborn as a powerless character when others get special abilities. But then, a new thought emerges. Knowing the future is a powerful advantage, making him a prophet of sorts. With this foresight, he wonders if he can simply eliminate the root causes of the world's destruction. He remembers the main villain, the embodiment of wrath, who plays a central role in the kingdom's downfall, and he also recalls the other 4 individuals who will eventually become the rest of the 5 Great Sins. And so, he figures it should be possible to intervene and change their fates since they are all still children in the current timeline. 2 months pass, and Alan has already put his plan into motion, starting by rescuing orphans from a testing facility. His knight, Evan, reports to him, confirming that the orphanage's management was entrusted to a girl named Yuchia. Alan commends his knight, stating that his eyes were precise and that Evan is incredibly skilled at his job. The knight seems taken aback by the compliment, so Alan has to confirm that he is being sincere. And Alan forces a wide smile, telling his knight that he looks forward to continuing their work together, though Evan finds the expression unsettling. The young noble reflects that possessing this body feels strange, as if the new soul only inhabits his mind, not his face. Evan thanks his master for the praise. The knight is a rare character in Psychedelia, known for his unwavering loyalty despite betrayals. The knight asks if the mission was to save the girl named Yusha. After Alan confirms, his companion says he understands why. Even with his long experience as a mercenary, Evan could tell that the young girl was far from ordinary. He recalls finding her and other children imprisoned and chained in a dark, grimy cell. And so Yucha was so powerful that he couldn't comprehend why she had surrendered and allowed herself to be captured. Back in the present, Evan asks why Alan left her at the orphanage instead of bringing her to the mansion. The young master agrees it's a good point. However, Alan thinks to himself that leaving her there, while it may seem like neglect, is a crucial part of his plan. He knows that Yusha Bludia is a non-human who will eventually make a contract with an otherworldly being to gain immense power. This contract is what will ultimately transform her into Wrath, one of the terrifying 5 great sins. By letting her grow up in peace at the orphanage, Alan believes he has successfully diffused a major future threat. Clearing his throat, he tries to come up with a vague excuse to satisfy his knight's curiosity, and he simply tells his companion that it is not yet time, adopting a serious and mysterious tone. The knight is confused by the cryptic answer, wondering what his master means by that. After a moment of silence, Alan instructs Ivan to ensure secrecy and provide the orphanage with sufficient funds, and he then hands his knight a letter, telling him to deliver it personally to Yusha. Evan takes the envelope, asking if its contents are important, and Alan explains that he wants to reassure the girl after the difficult ordeal she has been through, and the knight promises to deliver it. As his companion rides away, the young noble watches from the window, hoping his letter will make a difference. Alan recalls a scene from the game where an archbishop tries to use a spell to befriend and calm the non-human girl. In the game's story, the archbishop chants the spell, attempting to quell the power of the sin of wrath. However, his efforts are in vain as the girl stands before him, her transformation already complete. Against the backdrop of a blood-red moon, she unleashes her devastating power, proving the spell ineffective, and so her transformation is irreversible, a demonic horn growing from her head as she declares it is too late. In the original timeline, the attempt to calm her fails completely, leading directly into a major boss battle. But in this new reality, Alan stretches, confident that it is not too late. He decides it is time to move on to his next target. He thinks the archbishop's method was ridiculous, but it might work on fanatics who worship otherworldly gods. The young noble finds their way of thinking difficult to comprehend, seeing them as nothing more than zealots. Meanwhile, at the orphanage, Yusha stands alone, holding the letter she received from Alan. Evan watches her from a distance, shocked by the unbelievable amount of mana he senses radiating from the child. He finds her unsettling, noting that she appears to be completely devoid of emotion, her presence creating a strange aura. The girl turns to him and asks if it is true that Mr. Allen was the one who sent the letter. Her aura intensifies with a red glow as she pointedly asks why he did not want her to be by his side. The knight is paralyzed by her overwhelming presence, struggling to find an answer to her intense question, and he realizes in terror that manifesting mana in such a way is a feat only possible for those who have reached the master realm. Suddenly his master's cryptic words echo in his mind, and he finally understands what Alan meant by, "It's not yet time." Stuttering, he explains that as a matter of timing. Yusha seems to accept the answer, and her powerful aura subsides. She clutches the letter, recognizing the spell's words as a secret promise, and accepts her new master's will. And so the knight is left stunned and speechless as the girl's immense power vanishes as quickly as it appeared. She smiles under the red moon, now fully understanding her new master's intentions and accepting his command. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Alan feels relieved, thinking he has successfully managed to extend his lifespan a bit. He drifts off to sleep, feeling motivated by the bright moon and ready to focus his efforts on saving the next child. His letter referenced a local tradition of placing primrose flowers on old scars, a gesture of peace for the deceased. And sometime later, while searching for information in the library, a large stack of books suddenly falls on top of him. As he searches for clues about the third boss, Even enters the room to report that the second child has been rescued. Alan quickly asks if the child was treated with kindness. His knight confirms the rescue was from an illegal slave market. Just as Evan speaks, the library door is suddenly kicked wide open, interrupting their conversation. The intruder is Tonio Palacio, Alan's arrogant and muscular second brother, who strolls in with a smirk, and so he immediately puts his younger brother into a headlock, mocking the illiterate boy for pretending to study. Alan internally notes how bothersome his brother is. He wants to fight back but knows he has to endure it for his plan. And playing the part of the weakling, he bows low to the ground and says he will leave the library immediately. Tonio puts his foot on his brother's back, but a dagger suddenly flies right past his head. The blade embeds itself deep into the wooden bookshelf, just inches away from his face. A figure stands in the doorway and complains about the noise, causing Tonio to look over in shock. The newcomer is Leo Palacio, the first son. He tells them to get lost, not wanting to see blood in the morning. Leo coldly tells his brother to drop the attitude, adding that he reeks of drugs as the two glare at each other. Alan recalls the game's quest, realizing the family's criminal power is far greater than he had anticipated. At the heart of the family's corruption, the two villainous brothers are locked in a fierce power struggle. Leo, the prostitution king, and Tonio, the drug king, are constantly fighting for control of their father's empire. Tonio Rug King manages a large-scale drug cartel, adding to the family's deep-rooted corruption. Realizing he cannot afford to mess with his dangerous brothers, Alan quickly grabs his knight and flees from the library. Once they are safe, Evan comforts his master, who reaffirms his plan to act like a weak and incompetent child to survive. Alan collapses onto a nearby sofa in exhaustion. His knight then remarks that the second rescued child also seemed far from ordinary, and the young master lies on the couch while his loyal companion stands over him, silently observing him. The knight is deeply puzzled, wondering how his seemingly useless master knows about illegal slave markets and secret experiments, and so he concludes that his master is struggling to keep himself together under the immense pressure of his secrets and plans. Alan confirms that the second child has been safely sent to the orphanage just like the first one. He thinks to himself that the boy is not just unordinary, he is a future disaster of cataclysmic proportions. The story is set within a united kingdom, with its central and most powerful nation being the Kalian Kingdom. The rescued child is Disma Kalian, a key figure from the game who is destined to become the second boss. After being sold into slavery and suffering endless abuse, he eventually transforms into the embodiment of the sin of sloth. This transformation awakens a terrifying and destructive power within the young, tormented boy. His unleashed energy is capable of causing immense devastation, leveling everything in its path. Alan recalls that despite his title, Deuce was a hardworking person, which is why he insisted Evan treat the boy with kindness. He explains that sending Dust to the orphanage was another instance of, "It's not yet time," which his knight now understands. Evan asks if the letter to Yushia was about the second child. Alan confirms it was, with some added small talk. He had asked Yushia to take care of the slightly sick child, entrusting the boy's well-being to her. At the orphanage, Dust stands alone under the moonlight, looking isolated and withdrawn from the world, and just then, someone approaches the lonely boy from behind, their footsteps echoing in the quiet night. Yuchi observes the boy's broken state, noticing the scars and marks covering his frail body. She recognizes the traces of the dark influence that has clearly taken a toll on him. The young boy looks up at her and asks if it was the black goat, his voice filled with a haunting emptiness. With a sinister smile, Yuchia congratulates him, telling him that the great moon has still chosen him despite his condition, and she encourages him to feel the power he has been given and to unleash his full, hidden potential. And she extends her hand, making him a tempting offer under the light of the full moon. If he stays loyal and follows their new master's orders, she promises that he will have his revenge. As his immense power awakens, she decides it is time to send her first reply back to Alan. She composes a letter, starting with a light greeting and an update on the situation at the orphanage. Back at the Palatial mansion, the peaceful morning is about to be shattered by sudden chaos. While Alan continues his search for information, Evan bursts into the library in a state of panic, shouting about big trouble. He struggles to get the words out, trying to report that the second young master has met a terrible fate. Alan turns to his knight, confused by the sudden commotion and the panicked look on his companion's face. It is revealed that his brother Tonio is already dead, his body lying motionless on the ground, and the scene shifts to an elaborate funeral, where a small crowd has gathered to mourn the second son's passing. The family patriarch, Count Palacio, sits surrounded by women, appearing more bored than grief-stricken. Alan observes the scene with disdain, noting how his father is indulging in drugs and women even at his own son's funeral. Tonio's official cause of death is an accidental fall, but Alan knows this is different from what he remembers in the game. In the original story, Tonio was killed by his older brother Leo, who then triumphantly declared himself the rightful heir. Now, Leo stands near the coffin, a smug expression on his face. Alan knows the culprit must be either him or one of his followers. Alan stands before his deceased brother's coffin, his expression unreadable as he contemplates the unexpected turn of events. With Tonio gone, the succession issue is resolved, and Leo absorbs the drug business, making the county outwardly more peaceful. In the meantime, Alan and Yushia have become pen pals, which he believes will be beneficial in the long run. He reads her letters, learning that Deuce is growing up without issue and has developed a fondness for puppeteering. Evan informs his master that the list of sponsors for the orphanage has grown, which he finds both unusual and positive, and so the knight then reports that he has received a call from the Information Guild about a clue they have found. Alan is relieved, realizing the clue must be an ancient book that will lead him to the third boss he has been searching for. And he and his knight sit in a lavish room, enjoying a quiet moment before embarking on their next crucial mission. The scene shifts to a dark, violent confrontation at a drug distribution site, with screams echoing in the night. And so two of Leo's men are discussing how their organization has grown to hundreds of members thanks to their master's generosity. However, as they walk through the site, they are horrified to find all their comrades lying dead on the ground. One of the men finds his hand moving against his will, a strange force compelling him to draw his sword. He is forced to turn his blade on his own companion, crying out for help as he loses control of his body. Under the mysterious influence, he ruthlessly cuts down his fellow gang member against his own will. A dark, cloaked figure appears as the last man falls, having orchestrated the entire massacre from the shadows. Dis, now a skilled puppeteer, watches the scene unfold, commenting on the entertaining show he has created. Yuchia stands beside him, questioning the purpose of his actions. He explains that he feels no pity for them, as they grind people up to create their drugs, but the act is unrelated to his own revenge. The boy reveals that this is all a foundation to create a space for their master to return to. Yuchi agrees, adding that they cannot let the place be shabby when their master finally arrives, and Deuce understands. A massive surge of pink and white energy erupts from the ground, signaling the start of their grand plan. With their powers combined, the two children declare that everything will now proceed according to their master's will. A blinding explosion of light marks the beginning of their takeover, their influence spreading rapidly. Under the blue moon, they pledge their loyalty, dedicating themselves to be their master's sword. They leave behind a massive, swirling crater, a symbol of their power and the start of a new era. 2 years have passed since Alan first became pen pals with Yushia, and his plans have been quietly progressing. An exhausted knight stumbles through the halls of the mansion, calling out for his young master. He finds Alan in the backyard and collapses from exhaustion. Alan casually greets his knight, Yeben, acting surprised to see him. And so the knight gives a thumbs up from the ground, reporting that the fifth and final child has been safely sent to the orphanage. Alan offers his overworked companion a plate of snacks, which the knight gratefully accepts. And so the young master reflects that finding the third sin was difficult, but thanks to his game knowledge, everything worked out in the end. He tells his loyal knight that he can finally rest now that the mission is complete. Yeben asks if the orphanage mission is really over. Alan confirms that it is, and a wave of relief washes over him as he looks up at the sky. His companion asks if he is happy but notes that he does not look it at all. Alan lies down on the grass, insisting he is. He claims to be smiling, though his expression remains as stoic and unreadable as ever. With a triumphant fist pump into the air, he celebrates the successful completion of his long and arduous mission. He thinks to himself that things have gone even better than he expected, with his plans proceeding smoothly so far. He remembers the tragic backstories of all 5 children, each one suffering through horrible experiments and abuse. They all became the 5 great sins after enduring their own personal tragedies and awakening their immense powers. And so Alan knew from the start that the chances of perfectly saving all of them before their tragedies struck were incredibly slim. Relaxing on the grass, Alan asks his knight for an update on the orphanage, even reports that everything is running smoothly. He adds that the children, who were like broken dolls at first, have brightened up considerably in their new environment. Alan is pleased to hear this, realizing they will not need to hire any additional caretakers for the orphanage. And so, he is surprised that Yuchia is handling her responsibilities so well, attributing it to her character's attachment to the orphanage. He concludes that Yuchia is a good kid after all. His companion then asks if there is anything special in the letter, and so the letter details how all the children are growing up splendidly and that there is no need to worry about Deuce or the others. Alan feels a sense of pride seeing all 5 of the future sins growing up normally, proving that environment truly matters. And so his knight then asks when he plans to finally meet them in person, reminding him that he always said there would be a time for it. Alan hesitates before admitting that he actually has no intention of ever meeting them face to face. He knows it would be good to get closer to them, but the process of them becoming sins was so horrific and tragic. He covers his face, admitting that even though he saved them before they awakened, he is still terrified of their potential. He decides that maybe in 5 years, it might be safe enough to meet them, and his knight silently accepts his decision. The young noble then declares that all he needs now is a self-defense skill to survive in this dangerous world. His companion points out that magic requires talent and then asks if his master has heard of a group called Blue Moon. Alan, feigning ignorance, says he has never heard of them as his knight explains they are a new group hunting down criminals. The young master comments that cleaning up trash sounds like good work but dismisses them as a temporary group not part of the game's original story. However, the knight reveals with a panicked expression that the group has apparently even started killing nobles. So faking a sudden surge of fear, Alan tells his companion that from now on, he will sleep in the room right next to his. Later that night, in a secluded and unassuming building, a secret meeting is about to take place. A figure sits in the shadows, ready to hear the weekly activity report from the mysterious group known as Blue Moon. Yuchia, the Sin of Wrath, listens as her comrades report on their successful missions. A cheerful, cat-eared girl reports that she has taken care of everything in her assigned region. Sol Young, the Sin of Pride, proudly declares that she has dealt with all the slave traders. She shows off her new outfit and jokes about a game she played with her victims before eliminating them. Rhine, the Sin of Greed, calmly confirms that all the bodies from Sol Young's mission have been buried. She then reports that the southern region has also been taken care of, her expression serious. A silver-haired young man adds that the illegal human experiment labs and the Avalon organization have been dealt with. Rayan, the Sin of Purity, smirks, confirming that their enemies were shredded without a trace. Yuchia smiles, pleased that everything is proceeding according to their master's will. And they are the secret organization Blue Moon, and they exist to serve the Great Moon and their master. And so Yuya believes that under their master's will, everything is perfect and there can be no problems. However, Deuce approaches her with a dangerous document discovered during the Southern Purge. Yuchia's perfect confidence wavers as she reads the document's shocking contents. The other members of Blue Moon look on, their expressions turning serious as they await her reaction. The rest of the group senses the gravity of the situation, their usual cheerful demeanor replaced by a tense silence. The document reveals a sinister plot. After the ailing count dies, an accomplice will eliminate the heir by poisoning. 2 years later, Alan attends another funeral. This time it is for his father, Count Palacio. The old count's official cause of death is listed as cardiac arrest, his face peaceful in the coffin. However, given his history of drug abuse, Alan knows the real cause is far from natural. And so at the funeral, he overhears a conversation about the Blue Moon ambushing and annihilating another group during the night, and so realizes that people are finally starting to take the Blue Moon seriously as a threat. With no one left to mourn him, the Count's funeral ends in a quiet and somber silence. And so as Alan and his knight walk away, Leo, the new head of the family, watches them from a distance. Back at the now emptier mansion, Even asks his master what his plans are for the future. The knight is shocked to find Alan packing his bags, and is told to start packing his own as well. Alan declares that they are leaving the estate, much to his companion's surprise, and so he clarifies that they are not leaving for good, but are instead heading to the southern part of the territory, and so his knight correctly guesses their destination is Rodmill, a small village in the south. Alan confirms his plan to move to the quiet village, and they prepare a carriage for their departure. Leo watches from a balcony as his younger brother's carriage leaves the grand estate. His expression is cold and calculating as he watches them go, his true intentions hidden. In their new home, Alan and his knight enjoy a peaceful life, with Alan cooking them a simple breakfast. The young noble flips a piece of toast, enjoying the simple pleasures of his quiet new life. However, just 3 days after their arrival, he is forced to return to the Count's mansion once again. He arrives to find yet another funeral, this time for his older brother Leo. Alan is frustrated to be back in the blood-soaked mansion, questioning why all the death flags are different this time. And he looks at Leo's body in the coffin and notes that the cause of death was a blade piercing his heart. He wonders who could have possibly killed his powerful and ruthless older brother. So as he contemplates the mystery, he accidentally makes eye contact with one of the other mourners. The man immediately panics and apologizes for making eye contact, quickly dragged away by another nervous guest. Alan is confused by the guest's strange behavior, wondering why they are all suddenly acting so fearful of him. The other mourners whisper amongst themselves and quickly move away as his knight, Yeben, approaches him. The young master asks his companion if he has found any information regarding his brother's sudden death. The knight recalls a past conversation where he had asked Alan if he was the one who wiped out the entire Avalon organization overnight. Alan looks on, completely bewildered by the situation as the guests continue to give him a wide berth. The story flashes back to the day Alan left for Lommel. As his carriage departs, his companion starts a conversation about their destination. The companion asks why he chose Lodmel, suggesting a city would have been a better option. Alan simply hums, considering the question. With a confident smirk, Alan firmly disagrees. He declares that Lodmel is the final, essential destination for his grand plan. He explains his mission was to save the 5 great sins from their misfortune, thus preventing a future filled with despair. By altering their fates, he successfully stopped the world's destruction and ushered in an era of peace for everyone. He chose Lodmel because it's completely unrelated to the original story's events. Plus, it conveniently has a luxurious villa waiting for him. It's the perfect place for him to finally live a quiet and leisurely life like a noble, far from all the chaos he had to endure. But his companion isn't convinced by the simple explanation. He points out that the young master always gets evasive when he's bothered. Alan awkwardly clears his throat, quickly trying to change the subject and put an end to the conversation. Meanwhile, back at the estate he just left, a solitary figure watches from a high balcony as the carriage disappears down the road. The man, Alan's older brother Leo, stares down at the carriage. He coldly wonders to himself whether he should have his brother killed. He muses that the boy is useless anyway. He even thought about poisoning him after their father's death but never went through with it. And since his younger brother is now heading to the frontier without a fuss, Leo sees no immediate reason to go through the trouble of killing him. He scoffs, thinking that perhaps his own difficulties with Avalon are the real reason he's letting the matter slide for now. And his hand tightens on the stone railing. Ultimately, he decides his brother is nothing more than a persistent annoyance. Turning away from the view, Leo calls out to a man named Alman. He gives a simple order to follow the departing carriage. Alman, who is revealed to be Leo's right-hand man, asks if this means he wants him to assassinate the target. Leo turns back, a hint of surprise on his face. He seems taken aback that his subordinate would question such a straightforward command. He finds it strange, noting that Alman is someone who has always followed every order without a single word of complaint. The sudden questioning from his most obedient subordinate makes Leo suspicious and puts him on edge. Annoyed, Leo coldly reminds his subordinate that his only job is to do as he is told without asking questions. But before he can finish, Alman suddenly strikes, landing a powerful, glowing blow directly into his master's chest. Stunned and bleeding, Leo looks down at the sword piercing him, accusing his once loyal subordinate of daring to betray him. The attacker calmly replies that he happens to enjoy war games, revealing a hidden motive behind his actions. It is then revealed that Alman is actually Hidden, a member of the Blue Moon organization, who admits his time serving Leo has been fun. He explains his organization follows a creed from the Red Moon, where the Blue Moon acts as a sword, moving only as it is wielded. However, he continues, if anyone ever dares to try and harm the Great Moon, their allegiance immediately shifts. In that specific case, they are permitted to move on their own. He then brutally pulls his sword from Leo's chest. As his former master stumbles back, Hidden reveals he waited 2 years for Leo to finally give the order harm the Great Moon. Leo weakly threatens him with his men, but Hidden retorts that with those last words, Avalon is now doomed to disappear from the continent. Looks on without emotion as Leo collapses, remarking that the entire situation is a pity. He states that the Great Moon had given Leo a chance. He then throws the dying man off the balcony into the night, and the scene shifts to the peaceful town of Lodmel, bathed in the warm light of a rising sun. Miles away from the betrayal, Alan wakes up and stretches, happily thinking to himself that Lodmal is truly a paradise. He sits up in bed, enjoying another peaceful morning and the freedom to wake up whenever he pleases. He and his companion enjoy a quiet breakfast together, a simple pleasure that he can finally indulge in. As he enjoys a piece of toast, he thinks about how he could finally live like a true noble and even jokes about starting a toast business. But his tranquil meal is cut short when his companion rushes in, announcing that a telegram has just arrived for the young master. Caught by surprise, Alan's hand slips, and the piece of buttered toast on his fork begins to fall. The piece of toast lands with a soft splat on the clean floor, its topping facing down. The telegram contains shocking news. Following the death of his brother, Leo Palacio, Alan's immediate return to the estate is requested. He stares in disbelief at the message. His short-lived paradise, his 3-day free trial of peace, has come to an abrupt and unexpected end, and so, he finds himself back at the Palacio estate, standing grimly beside his companion as they look upon his brother's open casket. He soon notices that all the servants and guards are trembling with fear. He wonders why everyone is reacting in such an extreme way. His companion then turns and asks him directly, since when he became the mastermind responsible for destroying the Avalon organization. Alan is left completely speechless, feeling like he's been thrown into a non-stop simulation of insane and unbelievable situations. Sitting down with his companion later, he asks for a simple explanation that he can understand about why he is suddenly the prime suspect. The man explains it's because Alan is the only person who stands to gain anything from his brother's death and Avalon's disappearance. The timing was too perfect. Leo was murdered right after they left the mansion, giving Alan a flawless alibi and making him the new heir. Furthermore, with the entire Avalon organization wiped out, there's no one left to cause trouble or properly investigate Leo's death. His companion concludes with a flourish, declaring that Alan is now the mastermind of the county with a powerful assassin on his side. Overwhelmed, Alan sits down, trying to figure out where to even begin. He can't think of any group capable of such a feat. He then recalls a previous conversation and asks his companion about an organization that hunts others. The man suggests the Blue Moon. However, his companion quickly dismisses the idea, stating that the Information Guild has already reported that it's unlikely to be them. And so he explains that the Blue Moon may not leave bodies, but they always leave their distinct mark behind as a calling card. In this case, however, Avalon's members were brutally killed by swords, and the crime scene was described as a vision of hell. Alan finally understands the situation. This is why everyone now sees him as a ruthless mastermind with a sword master at his command. He recalls that the Blue Moon never appeared in the game. He reasons that such a weak group couldn't be the real culprits and wonders who it was. He turns to the silver-haired girl he saved, who is now one of his allies, and asks if her group managed to find any traces at the scene. The green-haired girl steps forward instead, confirming they found nothing. She and the others appear ready for a fight. The cat-eared girl chimes in eagerly, brandishing her dagger and confirming there were just lots and lots of bodies at the scene. In a flashback, a young boy with glowing butterfly wings announces their arrival. He states there are 486 Avalon members remaining, and just as their boss instructed, they moved in to deal with the remaining forces of the notorious organization. A white-haired youth with a massive sword confirms with a grin that they cut every single one of them in half. The silver-haired girl watches the destruction with a satisfied smile, deeming their work perfect and the outcome good. In just 5 days, the massive Avalon organization, which once held immense power over the Asteria kingdom, was completely turned to dust. Back in the present, the girl tells the white-haired youth that the cleanup isn't quite finished yet, prompting him to ask what she means. And so the youth then presents a folder, revealing that he found evidence of more nobles who were connected to Avalon's illicit activities. He specifically points out the Alcha Duchy, which appears to have been very deeply involved with the now defunct organization. The silver-haired girl falls silent for a moment, absorbing the new information without any outward reaction. She then looks up with a sinister red glint in her eyes, confidently stating that he already knows what she is going to say. Her team, comprised of the cat-eared girl, the boy with wings, and the green-haired girl, stands ready to follow her command. The white-haired youth smirks, ready for action. He states they'll take care of the new targets quietly and efficiently. The leader closes her eyes for a moment, seemingly preparing herself for the next step of their plan. She then turns to the green-haired girl and asks if the Information Guild is clean and if everything is in order on that front. The girl confirms that the guild is treating the matter as unrelated to the Blue Moon, and her feline companion eagerly presents the documents. All the guilds share the same stance, attributing the entire massacre to an event they now call the hell created by the Sword Master. And so the documents float around him. The winged boy asks if they should maintain surveillance on the new targets. Their leader insists they maintain it, adding that this matter must absolutely not reach that person, her expression turning serious. She then clarifies to her group that this particular case was not an official order. It was a personal matter because Leo targeted Alan, and she reminds her team that a sword is supposed to think for itself. It only exists to be wielded by its master. The Blue Moon must only ever move on command, and she warns them to always remember that that person knows everything they do. And she gives a final, stern warning to her subordinates, telling them to never disappoint the one they serve. The boy with butterfly wings looks conflicted, admitting to himself that he cannot understand something about their leader, Uriah. He finds it strange that a person with such overwhelming ability would feel so much anxiety and nervousness over simply being found out. After a moment, he seems to reach a conclusion, holding up the documents and stating that he understands now. Everything they do is for the great moon, for that one person. The scene then transitions to Alan's new residence at night. Inside, Alan is completely exhausted, slumping over a desk piled high with paperwork and muttering that he can't take any more. After his brother's funeral, he was incredibly busy for a month, forced to handle all the affairs of the estate. All he wants is to relax and live off his money like a proper noble. He feels he's earned it, though he has gained some resentment. The problem is that Leo's death, which was supposed to happen 6 years later, has drastically changed the timeline, piling all the work on him. Just as he's about to despair, a nervous knock comes at the door, and several vassals enter, carrying even more stacks of documents. Alan sighs, wondering why everyone is working so hard. He recalls that when the previous count was around, they were all lazy. The vassals are now terrified, mistaking his silence for anger. They think they must work even harder because they don't want to die. Alan realizes the vassals are also working seriously due to the rumors of him being a mastermind. He just wishes they'd handle things themselves. Later, his companion finds him roasting sweet potatoes over a magical fire, calling out to the young master. The man admits that he is genuinely surprised by Alan's rapid growth and magical ability. He notes that reaching the second tier of magic in only 2 years of self-study is a sign of remarkable and rare talent, and usually it takes about 4 years of dedicated training, and even then, one must be born with the gift for magic to use it at all. Alan brushes it off, saying he just practiced hard for self-defense because he was so anxious about potential threats. He then dismisses his own talent, questioning what the point is when his skills are only half-baked and incomplete. In a brief flashback, he remembers when he first started practicing, finding it strange to be using magic in a fantasy world. Back then, he believed he could just study slowly, thinking that once his main plan was complete, he would be safe from any danger. But now, with survival being a real concern, he has realized the truth. His mana hole is incredibly small, and nothing he tries seems to work. The mana hole a person is born with is a fixed trait, much like an athlete's natural body type, and it cannot be changed. And as he visualizes his own energy pathways, he concludes that his personal mana hole is unfortunately quite a bit, very small. It's so small in fact that no amount of training can overcome this fundamental limitation on his power. Just as he's about to give up, his companion Ivan pipes up, holding an envelope and announcing a dance invitation has arrived for him. Alan looks up from his roasted potatoes, surprised by the unexpected news, and questions the idea of attending a dance party. The scene shifts and Alan is now dressed in a fine, formal uniform with a cape, looking every bit the part of a high-ranking noble. Despite his impressive appearance, he already feels a wave of exhaustion just from being present at the grand event, and so the narration explains this is a regular ball held for the purpose of networking among the nobles of the southern Asteria kingdom. He decides that since he will soon be the count, he should use this opportunity to build some connections for the future. However, he and his companions stand awkwardly to the side, isolated from the mingling crowds of the opulent ballroom. A young noble named Lim approaches them, but as he greets Alan, the young count seems to flinch away nervously. After the brief and cold greeting, Lim and his group immediately walk past Alan without another word, pointedly ignoring him. Evan tries to comfort him, telling him not to be upset, but Alan coolly insists that he is not bothered at all, and he states that he fully expected this kind of treatment. He then tells Evan he will be back and walks away with a determined look. He knows he is being ignored because he and his family lack the dignity and reputation expected of high nobility. Unlike his illustrious great-grandfather, the current Palacio family is looked down upon as the black sheep of the East. But he didn't come here without a plan. He decides to use the social skills he secretly practiced to turn the situation around. He approaches a young lady and comments on the wine, noting that its taste is truly unique and interesting. Leaning in with an intense expression, he adds that the aroma seems particularly distinctive and pleasant. With a creepy smile, he says he would like to have a few bottles at home, thinking a gentle expression is a must-have for socializing. However, his overly intense approach completely terrifies the young woman, who looks at him with wide, fearful eyes. She stammers that she will talk to her father and prepare the wine for him right away before fleeing in a complete panic, and so realizes this isn't what he intended as the other nobles whisper that he's a bigger scoundrel than his infamous brothers. In denial, Alan simply concludes that the young lady must be uniquely shy, refusing to accept his social failure. A little later, his companion approaches, remarking with a bit of awe that his loot has somehow increased again. The list of gifts includes a fine horse, tea and wine, but Alan is dejected, lamenting that even his wine studies were useless. He finally accepts that the Palacio family name is far more infamous and hated than he had ever imagined. Because of the rumors that he killed his scoundrel brothers, he seems to have become a person that everyone avoids at all costs. He tells his companion he is going to get some fresh air. His friend simply says okay as he watches him walk away. From a distance, an elegant woman with striking red hair observes him with a calm expression as she sips her wine. Alan finds a quiet moonlit balcony and leans against the railing, looking out at the night sky and taking a deep breath. He wonders where everything went so wrong when a soft, feminine voice suddenly asks if she can speak with him for a moment. He turns around, completely surprised that someone would willingly approach him after how the other guests have been acting. He looks towards the ornate doorway, trying to make out who is speaking to him from the shadows. The mysterious voice simply says, "I am," as he waits for the person to step into the moonlight and reveal their identity. A young woman with long brown hair appears, introducing herself as Loria, the third daughter of the Alchi ducal house. He immediately recognizes the Alchi family name and greets the young woman with a newfound sense of caution. He recalls from the game that the Alchi family is one of the three great villains, known as the Black Sheep of the North. He reasons that anyone who would willingly speak to him couldn't possibly be an ordinary person, given his current reputation. But as he looks at Loria, he finds himself struggling to remember her. He can't recall ever seeing this particular girl in the game. Loria senses his confusion and decides to get straight to the point with her request. She looks at him pleadingly. She asks him to lend her his strength, a request that sends a jolt through Alon as he stares back at her with glowing eyes. The young nobleman continues, her voice trembling slightly. She reveals that she will soon be assassinated. Her confession hangs in the air as they stand alone on the moonlit balcony of the grand estate. The young girl looks down, nervously clutching her hands as she waits for his response to her shocking revelation. She explains that she has always received her father's affection, and until now, she was protected as the daughter of his mistress. But now the Duke of Alchi has fallen gravely ill, and her position within the family has become incredibly precarious. With her father on his deathbed, her sisters are now plotting to kill her. She concludes that her situation is all about survival. Alon finally understands why he doesn't remember her. He realizes that in the original game's timeline, she was already dead before the story even began. Loria then makes a desperate plea for his help, but without a moment's hesitation, Alon flatly refuses her request, turning away from the desperate young noblewoman. Before he can leave, she tells him that if he helps her, she will give him half of the Alchi house, but he cuts her off. He thinks to himself that her situation is pitiful, but he has enough trouble just keeping himself alive and can't invite more danger. He also knows that even if he wanted to help, he doesn't have any special powers to offer, unlike what the rumors suggest. Loria watches him walk away, her expression shifting from desperation to a quiet, determined resolve. As he leaves the balcony, Alon clutches his collar, feeling a sudden and overwhelming sense of suffocation. As he turns to go, the young woman calls out one last time, telling him that something good will happen for him. He walks away through the now empty ballroom, silently hoping that the desperate girl manages to find a good ally to help her. Meanwhile, two hooded figures watch from above. One notes that Alchi has approached the Great Moon and considers informing the Red Moon, but the other figure says it won't be necessary. She explains that according to their information, Loria is not entangled with Avalon. This means the young noblewoman is not one of Raidan's targets, which simplifies their current mission significantly. The first figure agrees it makes things easier, as the rest of the Alchi family will be dealt with anyway. They now have a new focus. According to the Red Moon's command, their priority is to cut off the information flow so the Avalon incident never reaches the Great Moon. Back on the ballroom floor, Alon happens to look up, noticing the two mysterious figures watching him from the balcony above. He feels as if there's an invisible barrier around him when the red-haired woman from before suddenly approaches and greets him. He is completely taken aback, wondering if the greeting was truly for him. He replies with a simple hello, feeling a bit hopeful. But then he recognizes her face from the game and immediately thinks to himself that she is yet another shady character. The woman smiles coyly behind her fan, and Alon concludes that anyone who approaches him first can't possibly be a normal noble. He decides to play along, greeting her formally as Lady Zenonia. She feigns surprise, asking him how he knows her name. Alon calmly replies that of course he knows her, explaining that she is quite famous throughout the kingdom. He recalls the three great villainous houses of Asteria. In the north, there is the infamous House Alchia. In the east, there is his own family, the disgraced and feared House Palatio, known as the Black Sheep. And finally, in the west, there are the notorious degenerates of the Zenonia family, who hold significant power. The woman Kali, eldest daughter of Count Zenonia, asks playfully if she is really that famous, a sly look in her eyes. Alon remembers that if his family is considered a brutish gang, the Zenonias are a much more refined, corporate-style syndicate. He feels utterly defeated, realizing he only wanted to make some peaceful connections, but he keeps running into major villains instead. He decides to play the part of a suave noble, telling her he knows her because she's beautiful, but he internally resolves never to get involved. Kalia thanks him for the compliment and, with a dangerous glint in her eyes, suggests they talk more somewhere private. Alon quickly declines, stating there are too many eyes watching them. He silently begs for her to let him go quietly. She gives him a knowing smile, commenting that he is just as the rumors say, which only increases his internal panic. As she walks away, she tells him that she looks forward to seeing him again, leaving him completely baffled by the encounter. And the elegant woman disappears back into the crowd of nobles, her mission to test the new Count Palatio seemingly complete for now. Alon is left standing alone, utterly confused by the sudden and strange interaction with the infamous Lady Zenonia. High above, the two hooded figures report that information about the Avalon incident is being perfectly contained. But there's a new concern. It seems Kalia Zenoni is constantly observing Alan. One of the figures notes that the young count now has a tail, and since they have no direct orders regarding her, they decide to simply watch and eliminate her if she becomes a threat. Sometime later, Alan and his companion stand before a deep, dark canyon. Even asks if his lord is certain about this location. Alan ignores the question, noting how dark it is inside the canyon despite the broad daylight. He has finally found his real objective. They venture inside, where they find ancient stones covered in glowing blue runes. Alan is relieved to see it's the real deal. He reveals that his true reason for coming all the way to the south was to find a specific location, the Labyrinth of Whispers. He explains that if one can solve the riddles in the labyrinth's 8 chambers, they will earn a valuable artifact as a reward. He smiles confidently, recalling the entire walkthrough from the game. It is finally time to savor the joy of some old-fashioned grinding. They walk past the massive, glowing runes that mark the entrance, ready to face the challenges of the ancient labyrinth. Alan is amazed to see the labyrinth's entrance in real life. Even though he got sick of the place in the game, it feels different now. Evan is impressed by the canyon, asking how his master knows of such places. Alan simply says he used to come here often, and he then dismisses his companion's confusion as daydreaming and tells him they should go, leaving the other man completely bewildered. Inside the labyrinth, Evan looks up at a massive stone block hanging ominously overhead, realizing it will crush them if they fail a riddle. The block suddenly drops, narrowly missing them as blood splatters from above, indicating a trap has been triggered somewhere else. Evan wonders how his lord can remain so calm in such a dangerous situation, as the young noble simply looks down at the riddles console. He reflects on their 4 years together, still unable to figure out his master's grand plan after so many unrelated and random missions. He also wonders how Alan knows everything about this place, even though he supposedly never left home before in his life. And despite his confusion, he has learned that following his mysterious young master has always led to something good in the end. As a hidden door begins to open, Alan feels a wave of nausea, knowing how brutal the next part is. They finally reach the treasure room, and even is relieved that the ordeal is finally over. The chamber is filled with glittering gold, and Alan tells him to just take the black ring from the skeletal hand in the center of the room and leave everything else. Evan is shocked that the plain-looking ring is their only goal, but Alan insists the rest will only bring trouble. He takes the simple black ring, the constraint, having finally obtained the artifact he came all this way for. He assures his companion that there will be nothing dangerous on the way back, but the man still looks incredibly nervous. As they leave, Evan thinks to himself that the labyrinth was easy, but he is startled when Alan suddenly stops. His lord seems to have expected something, and even realizes with dawning horror that the piles of stones in the canyon were actually golems. Faced with an unknown and powerful enemy, Evan immediately draws his sword, determined to find a way to get his lord out of there alive. Alan puts a hand on his shoulder, telling him that this time, he will be the one to handle the threat. He tells his loyal companion that no matter what he's planning, their top priority right now is to escape the canyon. Evan panics, realizing that his master's second-tier magic won't be nearly enough to defeat the powerful stone golems. But Alan calmly holds up the black ring he just acquired and utters a single command: constraint, commence. A blinding flash of light erupts from the ring, engulfing the entire canyon as Alan unleashes the true power of the artifact. He finds himself in a void-like space, where a powerful voice instructs him to speak the 2 constraints he wishes to enact. He recognizes this moment from the game, where a selection window would appear, confirming the voice is part of the artifact's power. The mysterious godlike voice belongs to the will of the labyrinth's reward, the artifact known as constraint. As the name suggests, it's an absorption-type artifact that imposes restrictions on the user in exchange for immense power. The sheer presence of the voice makes him feel like this is all real, not just a game mechanic. As he prepares to state his first constraint, the voice of the artifact booms, commanding him to speak his first desire without hesitation. Alan declares that for his first constraint, all spellcasting will absolutely require the hand seals of Babylonia. The voice asks what he wishes to gain from this. He replies that he wants the power to twist the laws of the world a little further, and his request is immediately granted, and he feels the power of the artifact surge through him, accepting his first condition. He then prepares to state his second constraint, feeling the immense power he has just unlocked coursing through his veins. The voice commands him to speak his second condition. He declares that in all spellcasting, only the sacred words of Babylonia may be used. When asked what he seeks, he replies that his goal is the same as before. He seeks to further bend the laws of reality. The powerful entity seems to hesitate for a moment, a silent question hanging in the cosmic void around them. Alan begins to worry that he messed up, even though he was careful to mimic the skill icons from the game perfectly. He knows that choosing both seals and words for the constraint gives the highest possible magic attack power, so it has to work. Finally, the voice accepts his second condition, acknowledging him as a human who remembers the forgotten great god. The voice offers its gratitude to him for carrying on the forgotten god's will, leaving him utterly confused by the statement. moment. Suddenly, he is back in the canyon. The black ring on his finger dissolves into light and is absorbed into his body. Evan cries out in alarm, watching in horror as the giant stone golem brings its massive fist down upon them. The golem is moments away from crushing them, its stone body glowing with a menacing red energy, and his companion shouts desperately that his power isn't enough, reaching out as if to stop him from facing the golems alone. Even after pouring all of his mana into the spell, the sphere of lightning that forms in his hand remains faint and weak. He knows that no matter how much he trains, this is the absolute limit of his natural magical ability due to his small mana hole. Facing the horde of massive stone golems, he decides that now is the perfect time to test the true power of the constraint. As the sphere of magic in his hand erupts with brilliant blue energy, he prepares to pay the price the artifact demands in return for power. Facing the horde of massive stone golems, Alain decides it is the perfect time to test the true power of the constraint, and the sphere of magic in his hand erupts with brilliant blue energy as he prepares to pay the price the artifact demands in return for its power. He unleashes the spell, a powerful refraction of light and energy that surges forward with incredible force. An intense burst of lightning immediately fills the entire canyon, crackling with raw, untamed power. And standing amidst the blinding light, the young man raises his hand, channeling the immense energy he has just unlocked. The brilliant blue light arcs through the air, descending upon the stone figures with devastating speed. He shapes the energy with his hands, creating a focused beam of destructive power known as a linear diffraction. With intense concentration, he directs the surging torrent of blue lightning toward the approaching enemies. The attack slams into the stone golems, a massive beam of energy overwhelming them completely. His companion watches with wide eyes, sweating in disbelief at the unbelievable power being displayed before him. The raw magical energy continues to crackle violently, filling the air with its immense pressure. The powerful spell rips through the canyon, striking down every golem that stands in its path without slowing. One of the stone giants is hit directly, its massive body beginning to crack and crumble under the immense force, and the blue lightning pierces straight through the golem, shattering its form into countless pieces. In a final brilliant flash, the immense magical energy finally begins to dissipate into the air, and so silence falls over the canyon as the two men stand amidst the remains of the golems, with only glowing runes left behind on the rocks. His companion can only stare in utter shock, finding the outcome completely unbelievable. Evan then asks if his lord was hiding his true power this whole time, but Alain tells him that is impossible. So the mercenary states that in 15 years, he has never seen anything like it and questions if that was truly second-tier magic. Alain simply replies that he told his companion he would handle it, then calmly turns and walks away. He simply confirms that it was, leaving his companion completely stunned by the admission. Alain admits that even he was unaware of its true power, thinking to himself that it was never this strong in the game he knew. He recalls the game's Psychedelia, where the turn-based combat allowed a spell to be enhanced once per turn using a sigil or incantation. In the game, he had used a chain lightning spell, strengthening it over 5 turns with 4 different incantations and sigils. By stacking Thunderblades, the spell was amplified into a configuration suited for large-scale lightning magic. He remembers the artifact's voice offering gratitude, realizing that inheriting the Forgotten God's will must be why his magic was amplified. Still, the result went far beyond his expectations and even surprised him. Meanwhile, his companion sighs in relief that they finally escape, so Evan slumps to the ground, exhausted, complaining that escaping the labyrinth was even tougher than fighting. He wonders aloud who on earth could have designed such a dreadful place, while Lane thoughtfully considers the question. And so, at that moment, the young man remembers that the Whispering Labyrinth actually had another name in the game. He recalls seeing it on community forums, where it was known as the Labyrinth of Palan, a mid-level grinding zone. Alen calmly tells his companion that the labyrinth was created by someone named Palan, which leaves Evan asking him to repeat what he just said. And so, helping his tired friend up, Alan says they are heading east, mentioning he has something to do once they return from their 3-week journey. He reflects on how the game worked, where matching a sigil to an element increased potency, and the right incantation strengthened its properties. But unlike the game, where only the attack stats increased while the visuals stayed the same, this reality was different. This time, he noticed that each sigil he used visibly altered the form of the spell itself. Every incantation caused an obvious transformation, making him wonder if his mana control is exceptional enough to perceive these subtle changes. He decides he will have to test it once his mana recovers, concluding that for now, everything turned out well as they prepare their horses. Later that night, as a crescent moon hangs in the sky, a mysterious hooded figure with green eyes watches them from a distance. Suddenly, the unknown person leaps from a high cliff, moving swiftly through the forest under the cover of darkness. The mysterious figure finally arrives at her destination, her steps echoing softly in the ancient ruins, and she stands before a massive stone tablet covered in glowing runes, identifying them as the script of the old Alanef Empire. The girl looks on with a knowing expression, her green hair swaying slightly as she observes the ancient writing. And so, the text tells a story of the swordmaster Palan, who stood his ground to protect a friend who would have been left alone. She sighs softly, reaching out to touch one of the glowing runes on the cold, weathered stone. She recalls the legend of the Radiant Emperor, the Great Palan, who repelled the invasion of the Black Ones, and defeated a great evil. The girl remembers all of this because she was born with a mission inside a place known as the Ancient Library, and as Elaine ponders the past, she thinks about how she knew the Blupia Queen from history was different from the records. She could sense that something about that legendary figure was truly extraordinary, unlike what was written. The young woman recalls that even the Great Moon once called Palan a friend worthy of the highest reverence. But the incantation Elaine used doesn't exist in the Ancient Library's records, making her wonder who he really is. Standing alone in a quiet clearing, the girl contemplates everything she has just witnessed, and she now believes what the Crimson Moon said was true, and feels ashamed for merely following her orders without question. The girl suddenly turns as another person announces their arrival from the shadows of the forest. A cloaked figure asks if she obtained the information, but she replies that the man in black has already perished. In a brief flash, she remembers how the man's neck was suddenly twisted twice in midair by an unseen force. And so, the green-haired girl states that she will have to report the incident so it can be handled properly. A flash of blue energy appears in the dark forest, signaling their departure from the now silent clearing, and the scene blurs for a moment, indicating a swift and sudden movement through the night. Two dark figures then fly up into the moonlit sky, disappearing completely among the treetops. The scene shifts to the grand estate of the Zenonia Count, where a red-haired woman sits alone in a room. She reflects on recent events, confirming to herself that the rumors she had heard were indeed true. The woman recalls a young man whose gaze was as cold and unfeeling as the depths of the abyss itself. She acknowledges that the house of Count Zenonia is both powerful and well known throughout the lands, but she finds it strange that she, a person who rarely socializes, has suddenly become so famous. She turns to her father, who is busy writing at his desk, and asks if he also finds the situation strange. The old man simply replies that is only natural, since she is the Count, seemingly unaware of her true nature. Though with a sinister look in her glowing red eyes, the woman begins to use her hidden power to influence him. Her menacing reflection appears in her father's eye as he stares blankly, completely falling under her control. The Count suddenly slumps over his desk, now a mere puppet, while his daughter watches with a satisfied smirk. She thinks no one suspects that she truly runs the house, but she now wonders how her secret was discovered. In another location, Elaine explains to a lady that there are eyes watching, and that even the spies she planted seems to have been detected. Back at the Zenonia estate, a man rushes down the hall, urgently calling out for Lady Kalia, and he reaches her and begs her to come to her room immediately, but she calmly asks him what is wrong. Inside the chamber they discover the dark, corrupted body of a man floating ominously in the air, and her guard reports that the seal on the man did not activate, meaning he was deliberately placed there. Kalia clenches her fist, a faint smile on her face as she once again wonders how her plans were uncovered. Surrounded by a menacing red aura, she realizes she has been caught off guard with a major weakness. Meanwhile, Elaine and his companion are resting, with the young lord watching over his exhausted friend. And so it is a known fact that the Labyrinth's golem soldiers have low intelligence, making it possible to escape by avoiding their gaze. A horse-drawn carriage makes its way through the archducal territory, approaching a grand mansion under the moonlight. Inside, a young noblewoman thinks to herself that her recent acquaintance is not someone to be taken lightly. She recalls the noble of the underworld, a man with eyes as cold as her father's and a dangerous reputation, and this person had been her last lifeline, her final hope for a way out of her desperate situation. However, she knew he would never agree to a deal that involved such heavy losses for him. She had been stripped of all wealth and power by her four cowardly siblings, Tamalian, Marianne, Philin, and Kig. After they took everything from her, she was left with absolutely nothing to her name. Until now, the young lady had only survived by clinging to her father's mercy and affection. As she returns to the mansion, a maid spots her and nervously announces that Lady Lori has returned, and so the servants rush toward her, delivering the shocking news that Lady Philin and Lord Kig have taken their own lives. The young noblewoman is completely stunned, asking them to repeat what they just said, unable to believe it. She finds it impossible, knowing her siblings were the type to stab family in the back, not harm themselves. With tears in her eyes, she desperately asks about her other siblings, Tamalian and Marianne. The terrified servants look down, struggling to find the words to explain what happened to Lord Tamalian. The tragic fate of Lord Tamalian and Lady Marianne is revealed, their bodies impaled together by swords. Loria stares at the gruesome scene in utter horror, completely unable to comprehend what has happened. From the rooftop, a white-haired figure leaps away with a sinister smile, declaring his targets eliminated. A swift blade cuts through the night air, shimmering under the pale light of the moon. The young lady stands frozen in the hall, wondering what on earth is going on as the servants flee in panic. Her eyes widen in terror as a strange phrase echoes in her mind, promising that good fortune will come to her. she suddenly understands he was the one who hid his claws, waiting for the right moment to seize power for her. He was the true shadow behind the Count's house, a silent force moving events from behind the scenes. Loria trembles as she finally grasps the full meaning of his actions, realizing she became the sole heir of the Alcha Duchy overnight. Standing alone by a window, she lets out a heavy sigh, processing the overwhelming turn of events. The young lady trembles, wondering what kind of demon she made a deal with, but she knows there is no turning back now. She is well aware of what happens to those who betray him, as there have been far too many examples in the past. Steeling her resolve, she decides that she can only move forward on the path she has chosen, no matter the cost. 2 months later, a man informs Elaine that he has come under the order of Duke Alcha, which surprises the young man. His companion is amazed as Elaine opens a gift box, recognizing the contents as a rare and expensive Cernax wine. Evan exclaims that each bottle costs several thousand gold, unable to believe he is actually seeing one in person. Elaine reads the attached card and sees it is from Loria Alcha, making him wonder why she would send him such a gift. He already feels guilty for not being able to help her more during her most difficult time. His attendant confirms that the Duke personally prepared the gift and ordered it to be delivered by hand. Elaine is stunned by the news, slowly processing the unbelievable fact that Loria, the youngest, is now the Duke. Meanwhile, the new Duke of Alchi is busy at her desk, diligently handling the vast amount of paperwork her new position requires. She stretches after a long period of work, letting out a sigh as she reflects on how the last 2 months flew by in a storm. After her father's death from illness, she held the succession ceremony and became the Duke, finally entering an office she was once forbidden from. Even though her siblings' deaths were sudden and mysterious, she managed to avoid any and all suspicion. Her alibi was her attendance at a ball, which kept her safe. At the time, her secret organization had been wiped out by her siblings, so when she had returned to the mansion that fateful day, she was surrounded by enemies and had truly lost everything. When Loria realized it later, she was horrified, knowing he had taken advantage of her desperate situation. And so even though he outwardly declined her offer with indifference, he then proceeded to handle everything perfectly, and the young Duchess wonders just how many steps ahead he is planning, since she never even told him about her father's death. She concludes that he must have reached out to her because his grand plan required the influence of Alchia. Although she has unified all the organizations under her family, she knows her power can't compare to what he conceals. This means he must want something else from her, something the powerful underworld tycoon Palacio does not already possess, and she realizes it must be the renown of her family name, a tool powerful enough to manipulate the political world from the shadows. And the young lady stands alone in a grand hall, gazing up at the portraits of her ancestors that line the walls. For now, she decides to focus on her duties, certain that her noble benefactor will be in contact with her again soon. And so, with a soft smile, she can only hope that the gift she sent has pleased him in the meantime. And back in Elaine's office, the attendant who delivered the wine announces that he will be taking his leave. Elaine is left stunned by the news, while his companion wonders why his lord is acting so strangely again. The story then jumps back in time, a few months later, to 5 years before the beginning of the main story. A voice calls out to a much younger version of Elaine, who stands alone inside a grand estate. A familiar man runs up to him, correcting himself from a young master to count, a title the youth says he can soon use. And the young man thinks to himself that becoming a count was never part of his simple plan for a sweet life. And still, once he got used to the role, he admits he began to enjoy the various perks that came with nobility. And so his companion then hands him a letter with a red wax seal, informing him that it has arrived from Yuchia. Elaine takes it and asks if there is any information about the assassins who killed Leo, but his friend has nothing new. The man then asks what his goal is in all of this, questioning if his motivation is simply revenge. He explains that he just wants to be prepared, wondering if the small differences from the game are butterfly effects caused by him. And his companion teases him, saying that sounded quite count-like, but the young man just decides to go along with it. He then opens the letter from Yusha, wondering what news the orphanage has for him this time. The letter details how everyone is doing well, with Deuce becoming a professional at puppet plays and Sealang playing games with her friends. It also mentions that Ryan has been making things often, while Raydan has developed a new taste for gardening. And so reading the monthly letters has become a warm routine for him, and he smiles like a proud dad watching the children grow. The young count then asks his companion how old the 5 of them are now, which catches the other man by surprise. And Evan explains that they are about to reach the age to step into society, and most of the children he rescued are in that group. A fond memory of the 5 children flashes through his mind, their happy faces a stark contrast to their past. He realizes with a sigh that since they are grown up now, it is finally time to let them go. His friend questions this, reminding him that he kept the sickly ones close on purpose, but Elaine says it's time for them to have futures. And so, since he made sure they won't awaken as sins, he is confident they can manage on their own now that they are all healthy. He knows their individual talents well, with Yucha possessing a gift for faith and Deuce a natural skill with the sword. Ryan has a talent for research, Sealing for combat, and Radan a natural gift for leadership. The youth slams his hands on the desk, declaring that if he places them in the right positions, they will all be able to shine. He decides to give each of them a special gift, something he was already planning to do anyway. As snow falls gently outside the estate, the sun begins to set on another winter day. Finally finished with all his work, the young count throws his hands up in celebration, while his companion seems unimpressed, and his friend then strikes a pose and announces he will be off, leaving Elaine to wonder if he will get a bonus for his hard work. As birds fly into the sunset, he hopes the children will take his letters and bravely step into the wider world. A young woman with white hair announces that a directive has arrived, explaining that this time, they were all delivered personally. The 5 orphans stand together, each holding a letter, their expressions filled with surprise and curiosity. They each receive a special gift along with their letters, reacting with excitement, thoughtfulness, and quiet determination. A small tip reveals that Rhine loves exploring knowledge, and a good book is the best way to get closer to her. Raiden states that the orders have finally arrived, noting that their benefactor delivered them individually this time. The group looks at their new gifts with joy, with Seoling in particular cheering loudly in excitement. But before anything else, Yusha says they should review the previous letters, as his orders require a high level of understanding, and the others are surprised, saying only she could read them before, but she explains it is now time for everyone to see. And so they gather to read one of the old letters, finding only what looks like daily small talk and wondering if it is truly in order. So with a calm smile, their leader explains that he disguised the orders as ordinary conversations from the very beginning. She deciphers the hidden messages, revealing a structure of designating a target, giving a mission, and then reporting the results. A lone lantern casts a soft glow in the otherwise dark and quiet room, creating a moment of calm before the mission begins, and the 5 young adults stand together, carefully reading over the old letters and processing the true nature of their tasks. And Dis reads his orders to head to Caliburn, while Seelan complains about being sent to a desert colony. Raiden is assigned to the entertainment city of Raxus, and Rhine is told to go to the maze city of Larthania. Yucha reveals her destination is the Holy Kingdom of Rosario, asking if they all understand what they must do. She explains that the secrecy is to prevent information leaks and that they must all clearly understand and carry out their missions. One of them points out that using letters seems risky for leaks, suggesting a magic communicator would be safer. Yucha's expression turns cold as she reminds them all that their only job is to follow the orders they are given, and so Dus notes her chillingly steadfast trust, and after confirming he has not forgotten their duty, Seelung eagerly says they should read the order, and a young man clutches his sister tightly, a broom lying forgotten on the cracked ground nearby. He is finally reunited with the family he thought he had lost forever, a bond he holds with a shocked expression. Crying uncontrollably, he holds onto the person who is more precious to him than his own life. A letter from his benefactor mentions a gift at a hotel in southern Caliburn, but the young man admits it did not excite him, and he walks through a stone doorway, wondering what could possibly be waiting for him inside the small hotel. At that moment, his eyes widen in complete and utter shock as he sees who is waiting for him. The sudden letter he received had promised him a gift, one that would change his life forever, and the gift from the Great Moon, his mysterious benefactor, was something he never expected to see again. A young woman with purple hair smiles and waves, calling out to her brother as they are finally reunited. The young man Dis looks on with a warm smile, clearly happy to see his long-lost sister once more. He clears his throat, thinking to himself that even after a year, the memory still makes him feel embarrassed. He remembers the day he lost everything to the Black Things, a dark power that tore his sister away from him. Meanwhile, Alan thinks about how the unbelievably strong Reinhardt took 20 years to become a master knight, and so he wonders if he can start leeching off Deuce, who has already surpassed Reinhardt as a sword master, sooner than he expected. But then he sighs, realizing that he probably cannot, since he only ever receives letters from Yusha. He laments that he has no direct contact with any of the other children he personally saved. Even after going to the Holy Kingdom, Yuchia's regular letters contain news of the deadly sins she grew up with. Evan then shares another piece of news, informing his lord that Deuce was recently appointed as a knight in Caliburn, which pleases him. 3 months later, Ivan approaches the count with more news, noting how talented the young knight is. He reveals that Deuce has already made an entire knight order, shocking Elaine, who realizes he must be at least expert level. Elaine notes that it has not been long since Deuce's appointment, and even says people are predicting a 5th master knight in 10 years. In the past, Des tells his companions that their benefactor told him to become a knight and assured them their patronage would continue. Rhine then adds that he also told them the location of their gifts, with Raiden deciding they will find out everything once they arrive. And before they depart, their white-haired leader gives them one final, important instruction that they must all remember. With a serious expression, she strictly warns them never to mention the name of the Blue Moon, unless their benefactor says it first. Having received their final orders, the 5 young adults set off in different directions, beginning their individual journeys. 3 months later, Alen is in his study, surrounded by piles of books as he continues his research into the world's magic. He finds no changes to magic as he expected and decides he will have to experiment with it himself to understand the differences. He then asks his companion for an update on the investigation into Leo's death, but the Information Guild has found nothing yet. The young count becomes worried, realizing the butterfly effect from saving the 5 deadly sins is getting out of his control. He recalls how Loria, who should have died, became a duke and is now expanding her power at a terrifying speed. After some thought, he suddenly tells his surprised companion to stop the investigation into the assassin immediately. The youth believes this is a situation where ignorance is bliss, as almost nothing can escape the Information Guild's vast network, and so, he feels that digging into matters he should not could lead to his death, which would make any precautions meaningless. And so, he reasons that as long as he does not meddle in their affairs, the world's secret organizations have no reason to attack him. Seeing no point in continuing, he firmly tells his friend to have the guild stop the investigation, and the man agrees. Evan then brings up the swords of Caliburn, and Elaine feels a sense of pride, noting that Caliburn must be buzzing with this news. 6 months later, the seasons have changed, and the large estate is now bathed in the warm sunlight of summer. A full year has now passed since the 5 deadly sins moved out, and Evan approaches his lord with some very recent news. And so while the count is busy writing, his companion reports that Deuce has officially become a Sword of Caliburn. The young count is in shock, his hand glowing with magical energy as he processes the incredible news. He questions how this is possible, since only sword masters are supposed to be able to become master knights, and so he remembers the game, where sword masters were those who went beyond the aura blade and unlocked a unique ability called derivation. Alen asks if Des is a sword master now, but his companion clarifies that he is about to become one, as he has not created his derivation yet, and despite this, the nation still gave him the title of Master Knight, a decision influenced by several factors. Not only did the young prodigy win a duel against the 4th sword, but Caliburn also recently lost a Master Knight to the Northern Barbarians. The young count recalls that the kingdom has been at war for more than a decade, making the need for powerful knights even greater. Evan explains that it normally takes 15 years to realize mana and a few decades to create a derivation. Even the legendary first sword, Reinhardt, was 32 when he became the youngest Master Knight to ever exist. In the game, Reinhardt was a temporary comrade who had wielded a sword since he was 5, having great faith in his own abilities. And so, the young lord feels a bit bad, thinking that even though they have never seen his face, they could at least thank him for his gifts. He quickly shakes off the thought, reminding himself that he is more than thankful they have not awakened as deadly sins and destroyed the kingdom. Looking out the sunny window with his companion, Elaine decides that as long as the children are doing well, he is happy. The scene shifts to a grand city at sunset, the sky painted with beautiful shades of purple and pink. This is Kirtham, the capital of Caliburn, where the residence of a high-ranking noble is located. So the grand mansion is home to the illustrious solar eclipse knights, who are seen training diligently in the courtyard. Inside the magnificent building, a lone figure stands by a large arched window, gazing out at the evening sky. Des Macallion, now the captain of the Solar Eclipse Knights and the youngest Master Knight, lets out a soft sigh. So, he catches a reflection in the window of his sister, who has come to visit him at the grand estate. As he turns to greet her, a dark memory flashes through his mind of the day she was taken, and all he had left was a single, desperate reach. All he had left was a single, desperate reach, a memory filled with the uncontrollable rage of losing his sister. He was completely helpless, surrounded by a swirling vortex of dark energy as he watched her being torn away from him. Left with nothing but hatred, the young boy sat alone in a dark cell, clutching the only memento he had left of that day. But when a woman from the Blue Moon promised he could take revenge with his own hands, he agreed to follow her orders without hesitation. Working as part of the secret organization put him through many dangerous missions and intense training, honing his skills for his ultimate goal. Driven by his singular purpose, he never once cared for his own well-being, pushing himself to the absolute limit. Soon enough, he received his first personal order, a task so out of the ordinary that it immediately struck him as strange.